Welcome to today's episode of me reviewing highlights. It's been a while, almost a week, right, since my last episode, and it's been a busy weekend, busy week, and there were really nice passages over the weekend, especially last Saturday. But let's see what we get today. So, starting the starting with the first one, that's from Get It Done. When pursuing an ought goal, it's fitting to avoid losses. When pursuing an ideal goal, it is more fitting to approach gains. For example, when your goal is to keep yourself safe and ought, you can motivate yourself by defining a goal as avoiding damage to yourself or your property. When pursuing a goal to join a choir, an ideal for many, you can motivate yourself by defining a goal as mastering a certain vocal range. So there are different types of goals. The two that's described over here is an ought goal, as in something that you should, that you must, and an ideal goal that's really something that you want to do. You somewhere you want to reach. So the motivations in both of these goal types they work differently. For a goal that you must achieve, uh, for example, for safety, that's something uh, that you should have, that you must have, that you should focus on. And for that, avoidance goals are better. For example, avoiding damage to yourself or your property, or avoiding something happening, or avoiding doing something. This is especially true for cases of compliance. If you're building something that needs to be compliant to some standard, then you're focusing on avoiding issues. For example, if you're building a website and you want to be compliant to accessibility regulations, then you're avoiding colors which are too close to each other. You're going for contrast. But if you're pursuing a goal which is an ideal, then approach goals work better for motivation. Moving on, kill it with fire. Restoring legacy systems to operational excellence is ultimately about resuscitating, resuscitating. Okay, I'm messing this up. I don't know what happened today. An iterative development process so that the systems are being maintained and evolving as time goes on. So, the author is making a point that sometimes, or often, not just sometimes, but often enough, when we look at a modernization project, a rewrite project of some sort, we feel one of the biases that we have is that we understand all the requirements because the system is already built. We understand all the requirements, all the constraints, and we can just immediately build one. But if you want to restore operating excellence from the legacy system, what you really should be looking for, is to implement an iterative development process, the same process that works in your regular development, uh, to restore that. And so that the systems are maintained and evolving as time goes on. So rather than letting the legacy system be and then go for a flash rewrite at the end of this whatever time period, you are iteratively improving it wherever you can. And the book, of course, covers strategies on doing this iteratively. Moving on, get it done again. Adherence to standards, doing things the right way, is stronger at beginning and end of pursuing a goal. To use this tendency to your advantage, you may want to keep the middle short. A weekly healthy eating goal is better than a monthly healthy eating goal, as it offers fewer days to cheat on your diet. And when it comes to a large project with a far away deadline at work, start by breaking it into weekly assignments so that you don't lose steam in the middle. This is something I think that we know innately, but when we plan things, we don't really think about it. So we don't care for long middles. It's not that we don't care for long tasks. When we think that, okay, this task is going to take 1 year, in fact, I don't even know how to process a task like that, something that goes on for 1 year. I mean, how do you plan for such a thing? But what we pay attention to based on research is the beginning and the end. Those are the only things that stick in our mind. The middle, the long middle, So the beginning maybe 1 week, the ending maybe 1 week. On the 50 weeks in between, you're not going to remember any of it. And that's the time when you lose all the motivation, when we lose all the motivation. And that is why when it comes, when we need to start a large project, the best thing to do is to break it into small tasks and each look at each in its isolation. So you have very short middle, you have beginnings and endings, and that will keep your motivation going. Beginnings and endings are the things that motivate you to keep going. And like in software development, um, shorter shorter sprints, for example, or forget even sprints, continuous development, continuous deployment are the answers to keep keeping the motivation going. Because if a task is not done, if a task is not deployed by the end of 2 weeks even, that's still on your mind, it's still not done because the deployment to production is still pending. And um, that's the time when you start losing motivation. That is why when you begin a task and deploy it as quickly as possible, which by the way is a Dora indicator, that's something that keeps your motivation going long term on a project. So let's move on to everyday chaos. The steam engine is an engine. It drives other things. What things? Whatever can make use of the back and forth of a piston. This is especially relevant today, nowadays, as in not today specifically. That the author is making a point that there are certain advancements in the human history which amplifies everything else. So, for example, engines are such things. So, steam engine is an engine, like it says, and it it has a point in itself. But the more important point is that it drives other things. So whatever that can make use of a back and forth of a piston, it's now helped by a steam engine. Computers are a generative engine that way. The author makes a point over there, and of course, this book was written before ChatGPT and everything. And but I'm sure if the book was written today, it will definitely mention ChatGPT as another generative engine because that is something that further drives. Well, technically speaking, I'm guessing it would be more like LLMs and everything. But the reason this sentence is in the book is because the author is talking about machine learning over here. This book is about machine learning entirely. And that's the point that there are certain advancements, and the author believes machine learning to be one such advancement which will transform, which will amplify everything else along the human history. Going on, the science of overcoming procrastination. The better we are able to visualize and interact with our future self, the better we get at taking good care of it. Right. I think this mixes various notions. One is visualizing where our future self would be, like maybe a year down the line, 5 years down the line, that kind of thing. But more than that, interacting with that. And there are other books that talk about empathy. That is, have empathy for your future self. In fact, get it done itself. There are a lot of sections which talk about empathizing with your future self in the sense of so if you're in fact I think we have covered passages around this. There is this discussion of okay, if you're planning a diet, do it when you're hungry, not when you're completely full. Because if you're hungry, you'll be able to empathize with your future self, which will have to deal with the diet plan. So that way, if you're planning a budget, do it when you're low on your finances. You're low on your monthly budget, for example. So the better we are able to visualize and interact, the better we get at taking good care of it. It's more effective that way. The talent war. The rotational team of A players forms the second and most intensive gate into the organization. Any candidate who makes it through this gate should have the raw attributes you've identified as part of the talent profile for the role. Okay, this kind of reminds me of Amazon's what is that thing called? Raising bar, hiring bar, raising bar, something. I'm forgetting the name. So it reminds me of that process where they look for candidates that raise the bar somehow, basically. And over here, the author talks about A players from your current team who form the second and most intensive gate into the organization. And yeah, that's really about it. Moving on. Why has nobody told me this before? Emotions tend to drive more extreme and biased views, but life is often more complex and full of gray areas. It's okay not to have a clear opinion on something while you take time to think about different sides of the story. So give yourself permission to sit on the fence for as long as you need to. Build up that ability to tolerate not knowing. When we do that, we are choosing to stop living life by the first thoughts that pop into our head. Our choices become more consciously thought out. I think the author is really talking about the heat of the moment decisions that we make or the reactions that we have on incidents. So the author is basically making a point that emotions introduce that bias. They tend to drive this extreme and biased views. So what you need to do is to take some time out. Give yourself permission to sit on the fence for as long as you like, as long as you need to, and build up that ability to tolerate not knowing. That often that's the thing, our thought that we need to know this by now. That is what causes us to make rash decisions and so on. So build that ability to tolerate not knowing, tolerate not making a final decision. That when you're communicating about something, you are okay not having an opinion on that matter. It's fine, and yeah, that's how you get ahead of your emotions. Emotions are a very useful tool, but very often we are at our mercy of our emotions, not the other way around. Okay, moving on. Accelerate. During the standards, problems are not solved, but there is a routine in place to ensure that they are rapidly resolved. If the problem requires collaboration with another squad member, it is noted and those members will discuss it later in the day. If the problem requires IT area lead support to resolve, the problem is noted and escalated. The IT area lead may resolve it quickly or take it to his or her stand up to raise it with other IT area leads or tribe leads to solve. Once resolved, that information is rapidly relayed back through the channel. Okay, I think there's not much to talk about over here. It's pretty straightforward in that sense that the author just describes what a stand up could look like. As in, stand ups should not turn into a problem solving meeting. Stand ups uh, uh, are a way to communicate more than anything else. They're just a communication mechanism. And if something requires, if a problem needs resolution, then the author is describing certain standards of certain methodologies of resolving any problems. So I think that's about it. Moving on to 7.5 lessons about the brain. Your brain is a network, a collection of parts that are connected to function as a single unit. Right. Again, I think not much to talk about over here. Um, yeah, I think in reflection with many other points of the book, it makes more sense. But again, in itself, there's not much to talk about over here. And this book has appeared multiple times in the past few days, so there is a lot of other passages. So I'm not going into that today. Moving on, because I think I'm at 13 minutes. The well lived life. You may have heard the adage, pride cometh before a fall, which is often misunderstood. Pride that is built through false pretenses such as thinking we are better or more important than others, or that our contribution is more worthy, will surely cause us to fall. But self love is not pride at all. It is gratitude for the life we have been given. When we refuse to love ourselves, we shut out love from everyone else too. This, I think, is a very succinct way of capturing this notion of self kindness, and I've had trouble of of kind of consolidating that, and this quote helped me understanding this better. So it's using this adage, this saying, "Pride cometh before a fall," and that is something I identify with. So this quote helped me that in qualifying this notion of pride that is built through false pretenses and such as this undue self-importance or thinking that our contribution is more worthy. This notions of greatness and grandness, and that is something that will surely cause us to fall. The this I'm not getting the word for it, so let's move on. So the author goes on to say self love is not pride at all in that sense. Self love does not have to be pride. Of course, many flavors of self love turn to that notions of grandiosity again. So again, it's the same thing. It goes back to being some sort of pride. But yeah, kindness to ourselves, self-love is not pride at all. It is gratitude for the life we have been given. So ultimately, it is gratitude. It's knowing that we matter, and realistically thinking that walking that middle path, so to speak, not um, because both extremes don't are not healthy. Thinking that I'm nothing, that self-deprecating notion that I'm not worthy of anything, and that the other notion, the notion of pride, as described over here, both of them are not healthy. They don't serve you. You're at mercy of either pride or self-deprecation, and both of these are coping mechanisms, of course, but you're at mercy of these things. The hardest thing to do is to walk the middle path, the path which the author goes on to say self-love, kindness to self. And that may seem easy. It may seem that, okay, no, it's so easy. Yeah, I mean, I'm just kind to myself. I have found it is not easy at all. I have had the greatest difficulty in dealing with this concept of self kindness, self love, and it's difficult because we have to always be conscious of walking the middle path, not the path towards self deprecation, not the path towards self pride, undue self pride, but the middle path that balances, that sees things as they really are. And that's a lot of work because you constantly have to think, am I on the right track? Am I really thinking, is this what I really am? It's a process of constant self reflection. It's constantly evaluating yourself, that yes, this is the right way to think about myself. This is what I have done. This is what it actually entails. This is what actually matters. And that's very, very hard, as you can imagine. It's exhausting, it's hard. So, self kindness is necessary, is hard. Like most necessary things are, most useful, most healthy things are hard. Self love is hard that way. And I think it is something for me to just accept that it is hard and do that anyway. That's the thing here. That's my takeaway over here. And that's really the end of our highlights. So I think we ended on a good note, but we're still at 17 minutes. And yeah, have a good day, everyone. Bye.